And they like to point to the origin of the universe and say, well, science can't explain the Big Bang, or science can't explain where the laws of physics come from. Physicists are working on that. That's what scientists do. They don't lie down and pathetically say, oh, we don't understand it, so God did it. Scientists actually work on the problem. They set to work, they roll up their sleeves, and they work on the problem.
And this raises the old so-called God of the gaps issue. You know, are we just punting to God to kind of plug up the gaps in our scientific knowledge? And certainly one would be very skeptical if that's the route I were trying to take, and I would share with you a real concern about that. But I want to emphasize that in the arguments that I've given, I gave two scientific arguments, the first and the second. Now, of course, the ethical argument wouldn't be affected by what you're saying, but the first two were scientific, and they were based not upon gaps in our scientific knowledge, but rather on what the best of scientific knowledge does tell us, so that it wasn't an appeal to God to plug a gap or to fill in ignorance, but rather it's saying that the best scientific evidence we have indicates that space and time are finite in the past, that the universe did begin to exist, that it did have this incredible complex fine-tuning of the initial conditions there, and that these are signposts that point beyond it to some greater reality as its explanation. And it just, I think, whether these arguments are worthy or not depends upon how convincing the evidence is that, in fact, the universe had a beginning and that it does have these complex initial conditions. And I think the evidence is quite good that it does. Let me try to get at this another way, too, though, that I think can be helpful, and that is these arguments can also be put in deductive forms so that they're not really appealing to God as an explanatory entity, but rather they're simply deductive arguments. For example, the first argument can be stated in the following way. Premise 1, whatever begins to exist has a cause. Premise 2, the universe began to exist. Therefore, 3, the universe has a cause. And then you unpack what it is to be a cause of the universe in terms of timelessness, spacelessness, immateriality, and so forth. Now, in a deductive argument like that, if the premises are true, then the conclusion follows logically and inescapably, whether you like it or not. And it seems to me that with regard to those two premises, they are both more plausibly true than their negations. Particularly that second premise, the universe began to exist. That's not a religious statement. That's a statement you can find in any textbook on astrophysics or cosmology. And it certainly seems to be more probably true than its negation. So when you put it in the form of a deductive argument like that, I think that it's a good argument for that conclusion. And the second argument can also be put in a deductive form. It would be premise 1, the initial conditions of the universe are due either to law, chance, or intelligence. Premise 2, the initial conditions are not due to chance or law. Therefore, number 3, they are due to intelligence. And again, it all depends on whether or not those premises are true, and I think that they are certainly more plausibly true than their negations, and therefore the conclusion would follow deductively and logically.